So first of all, like, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, my name is Joe Hudson. I'm a strength and conditioning coach in the Boston Red Sox organization. I work primarily in AA for the Portland Sea Dogs up in Portland, Maine.
Cool. So today I kind of want to talk about like rotation and like how it works when we go to like when a baseball player gonna hit a baseball or a pitcher gonna throw it, and what's happening when we do the rotational movement in the right leg or in the front leg and in the back leg. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, first of all, like what I just mentioned, uh, when we do a rotational, let's say I'm a hitter. Is that how you call it?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Let's say I'm a hitter and I'm going to hit a baseball. So what's happening in the back leg and what's happening in the front leg?
Um, so let's say we'll say you're a right-handed hitter, all right?
Okay. Okay.
So left leg will be your front leg, right
Yeah.
leg will be your back leg.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a pretty broad question, but um overall, I think the easiest way to explain all of this is starting with what happens kind of from the ground, both the body's interaction with the ground and also how the body is able to kind of initiate movement to begin with, kind of coming from the center and working outwards. So, with the hips and the core being the primary driver of that stuff, but ultimately the interaction with the ground is what's going to help kind of kickstart this entire cascade of events. From the ground, its interaction with the feet, ankles, all the way up the kinetic chain, ultimately into the bat making contact with the ball. So, um, without getting into too much like technical hitting terminology, not my strongest suit, I should say, but ultimately, a pitch is delivered, batter has an opportunity to interact. I should say the batter has an opportunity to identify what's coming, the pitch coming, and then initiate some sort of move, some sort of load to essentially help put the body in a position to get to the pitch on time, right? So get the bat to the ball at the right timing point, but also do that in the fastest, strongest, most efficient manner to impact the ball as best as you can. So, um, individual strategy, individual movement comes into play with a lot of this stuff, but ultimately with everybody there is some sort of interaction with the ground, right? So you're making some sort of load, okay, recognizing a pitch, making some sort of load, and then either getting your foot down, starting to transfer your weight forward into your front leg and into the ground to help create some rotation at your hips. So people do that a little bit differently. I think everybody has at least a little bit of everything across the board from, eversion, inversion of the foot, hip internal rotation, hip external rotation, and all of the stability requirements that go into that as well. Yeah, I think that's kind of like my big like introduction, like as kind of general as I can make it.
Cool, man. I know it's kind of like a big question and have to like have to like try to like make it easier for everybody. However, I'm gonna like dive a little bit deeper to like let's say it's a right hand hitter, right?
Yep.
So the right leg would be the back leg, right?
Yeah.
So can I understand it this way? It is it going to be like so it's going to be a rotational movement. So can I say like the right leg would be doing like pushing and the left leg would be doing something like deceleration? Is that
Yeah. Yep. So from a right leg perspective, what's going to happen is you're going to have a moment where your right leg is going to be pushing into the ground, right? And really just creating some force into your right leg, your back leg. And then as you transfer your weight and some momentum forward to your touchdown of your front leg, your left leg, there's going to be force pushing that way as well. So right leg's going to be pushing this way, left leg's going to be pushing this way. And I think how people generate that force and that rotational velocity is going to be a little bit different, depending on the type of hitter and what they're kind of trying to accomplish. But ultimately, those two forces into the ground, and then that kind of grabbing and holding sensation on the ground is going to help initiate the rotation up the chain, up into your hips, up into your pelvis.
so everything starts with the foot. Is that and am I understanding this correct?
Yes. Yeah, you could say that. You could also kind of make the argument that everything starts at the hips to begin with. When you're making an initial load, that leg lifting up, whether it's a high leg kick or just like a short stride forward, is going to come from you flexing your hip a little bit just to get your leg up, as well as your hips, your glutes, core musculature to help keep your pelvis stable on that one leg for a second. So kind of depends on how you look at it, really. I usually look at things from the inside, starting with the core and the pelvis, and they work their way out. So without getting too lost in which way you look at it, yes, the feet and the ankles are going to have a huge part in that as well.
Cool. So that's for the hitter. What about like the pitcher? Is it like about the same or is it different? I think they kind of like do a rotation the range of the movement of the rotation is like a lot or the degree of the rotation is a lot better, greater, right? Bigger.
Yeah. There's going to be more of a rotational component with pitchers than there is hitters. I think a lot of that ultimately comes down to timing, and the fact that pitchers don't have any reaction, right? They don't need to have any sort of reactive ability to deliver the pitch, I should say. Like they're in control in that moment, whereas the hitter is making a reaction based off of the pitch type, the velocity, when it's coming, where it's coming from, all of those things. So it kind of factors into there's a speed component to actually getting there on time, whereas as a pitcher, you're not reacting to what anybody else is doing. You're in control of the moment. So they're able to use greater ranges of motion, rotationally, to be able to generate more velocity.
Cool. So since it's a sport with a great degree of like asymmetry, how do you like arrange your training in the weight room?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's kind of like, in my mind, the golden egg of strength and conditioning for baseball players, asymmetrical sports. Because there's definitely a certain level of postural adaptation, that plays into being successful in a sport that's pretty asymmetrical. but how much is too much? How much is going to be a performance benefit versus how much is going to potentially increase your injury risk. I think that's what everybody's kind of, really trying to hone in on a little bit more. And, the more we look into that stuff, the more we find that it's very individual, person to person based around just what they have for available range of motion, like limb lengths and all. There's so many different things that go into it. But yeah, I think overall, we want to be able to get our athletes to be at the highest level of performance that they possibly can be, which includes being able to perform as much as they possibly can. So, if we can get somebody to throw 110 miles an hour, a pitcher to throw 110 miles an hour, that's awesome, right? They're going to have a huge performance benefit to that. However, if they can only pitch, one inning and then they're hurt somewhere, then they're not actually very beneficial, useful to the team. So there's definitely a fine line. And as you've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years that we've gotten closer and closer to that ceiling. I should say that ceiling. But everything is performance wise has continued to trend upward. So we're getting closer to what that kind of natural threshold would be, I guess would be the right way to say it.
Yeah, cool. So, is there any technology or equipment help you decide what you just said, the natural threshold, these kind of stuff, and how would you look at these data?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of technology. We're in the technology era right now with everything. I know a lot of organizations, a lot of places, even outside of professional baseball in the college setting and in the private sector setting, have the opportunity to utilize force plates to measure forces going into the ground, and force vectors, and Rapsodo and TrackMan to check spin rates on balls, ball velocity, all ball flight metrics. And then same on the hitting side in terms of swing path and, bat speed and, all the metrics there as well. So you could really get lost in a lot of it. And I don't think, everybody's trying to find the best way to analyze that data, and everybody has kind of their own way to analyze and interpret that data. But I think some of the kind of the cornerstones and the foundational concepts are, measuring force, being able to measure force and force vectors. So force plates and, mats that can, measure that stuff, and pressure sensors and things like that is always going to be, I think probably one of the more foundational pieces to that, the technology piece. And then I think now we're in an era where we're starting to take those individual tools. We're taking those individual tools and starting to draw correlations together. So that's kind of, I feel that's kind of where we're at with things. You look at somebody's force numbers, and then you can kind of find a trend with guys that have similar force numbers, say on their back leg versus what their spin does or what the ball velocity does, and start to tie those things together, and then kind of chase that down a little bit more of a rabbit hole to figure out if there's a really strong correlation with that stuff.
Yeah. I like the way you answered this question, because last week I was invited to go to a conference where there's grad students, PhD, postdoc, and some some therapists, some doctors attend, and I was invited to like join them to talk about like what they think probably the future of like strength and conditioning in Taiwan or in Asia. And because most of them are like they do research. They don't really have
Yeah.
a lot of like experience in training athletes or like even just training individuals. So I was invited there to like share my experience, and I noticed that there's a gap between like those guys doing research and those guys doing like what I said, like training athletes, training individuals. So I kind of like the way you answer like uh what we should do is like trying to like keep it simple and like do whatever we could for our athletes.
Yeah, I think there's always the hard part about strength and conditioning, I think, is that a lot of this stuff is originally, researched in,
It's
the
lab based.
laboratory or
Yeah.
controlled setting. And, that's where a lot of our ideals come from and, are based around. However, when you get you know, in the weight room or you get on the field, those things, not everything is applicable just because of, the other environmental factors that there are going on. And, it's everything is a much less controlled. It's, more of a controlled chaos, organized chaos type environment where you need to be able to do the best you can given what you have. And still, like, as strength and conditioning coaches who are, we want to maximize our athletes' performance, but ultimately the best way to do that is to be on the field and practice. Now, yes, they go hand in hand. And, improving your strength, improving your explosiveness, all those things are going to help make you a better athlete. However, if you need to be a better baseball player, like if you need to be a better hitter, like you need to practice hitting. If you need to be a better pitcher, you need to practice throwing. You need to practice
Yeah.
pitching. Like, so there's still like a pretty defined like line in the sand where research stuff is great, strength and conditioning stuff is great, and I think we're getting close to blending those things together.
Yeah.
However, like there's not always ideals in the strength and conditioning realm.
Yeah. So the next question is also come from that conference. After that conference, they kind of want me to like do a like education event like every month. And here's an interesting thing from those like researchers. They want to ask me about like what my thoughts about like strength and conditioning training and like the uh like sports performance training. Like, and I think the way they divide these two is like the old school and conditioning is all about like strength training, power clean, uh like or like mid thigh pull, core squat, these kind of stuff. And the way they view what's so called like performance training is probably like using like bands to do some rotational movement, using some bands to do like deceleration or like some movements that seems to look like what our athletes do on the field.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on like the old school? I'm not uh anyway, what are your thoughts on like the strength and conditioning training and like the sports sports performance training?
Yeah, I think honestly I've always kind of viewed myself more as a performance coach. At the end of the day, I think if you're working with athletes, there's a performance aspect that needs to be met. right? So just because you're really good in the weight room doesn't mean, just because you're really good at squatting or, hang clean or whatever it is, doesn't mean you're necessarily a good athlete, a good football player, a good baseball player, a good basketball player, whatever. So I think honestly, I see them as one entity, whether you call yourself a strength coach or a performance coach. Like, I have always seen them as one thing. However, I think there is, strength and conditioning. If you kind of consider yourself a strength and conditioning coach, like you're hanging your hat on, I'm making them better in the weight room. I'm taking them from point A to point B when it comes to the movements that we find value in. Say squatting, we took an athlete from 275 to 365 on their squat. So like I showed value, I got them stronger. Like it's somebody else's job to take that new strength and make it apply on the field. And I, in some aspects, with how competitive our field is getting, you can look at that and go, okay, we know that, the nuts and bolts, the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, how to change volumes and intensities to get guys stronger. But from a performance perspective, you're kind of hanging your hat on, I did what I did with them in the weight room, but it didn't make them better on the field. So now I'm not necessarily improving their performance per se. So you're kind of limiting yourself to what their potential faults are when it comes to proving your value, right? So I can make somebody jump from 275 to 365 on the squat, but that didn't make them a better hitter. Like if I'm considered a performance coach, I didn't make them perform any better. So am I doing my job well? From that perspective, probably not. Even though it's all still a collaborative approach when it comes to athletics anyways, especially at the professional level where, you need to integrate, you need to work with your skill staff to be able to, improve performance overall. So for me, it kind of, it's one and the same. I think there's certainly aspects to making your strength and conditioning program more robust in adding bands and rotational work and mobility stuff and injury prevention stuff, as well as improving, strength numbers and sprint speed numbers and stuff like that. I think they all kind of go hand in hand, as long as whoever you're working for, or whatever organization or, university or whatever you're working for understands what your job is and what the expectations are for you.
Cool. So, I want to go back to the question that when it comes to like baseball athletes, there's a lot of like asymmetry and do more bias to like unilateral training or like bilateral training, weight training. Sorry.
I use both. I think honestly, in my experience, I think as you get older and you kind of see, make more observations and you work with different groups of athletes, there's almost a shift in the mindset of everything needs to be bilateral. You need to squat, you need to deadlift, you need to bench press, to it's okay to actually get somebody stronger, and it's probably going to translate better to on-field performance going unilaterally with reverse lunging and step-ups and split squats and stuff. I think we just have, when we're learning about the strength and conditioning field, and when we're in school and when we're first starting out, it's, the X's and O's of squatting, deadlifting, all your bilateral, compound movements, they're going to get you stronger. And I think when we're younger, we are afraid to get away from those because we're afraid to see performance like decrements, right? We're afraid to see a squat number go down because then we're like not doing a good job as a strength coach anymore. So that kind of ties into your performance question as well. You know, are we improving their performance if we switch them from bilateral to unilateral because it's a more, more realistic. We're putting them in more realistic positions that better translate to the field. So, yeah, I use both. There's a time and a place for both, always. And I think outside of just the performance side of it, then you have the individual differences in movement side of it as well. Certain guys have different, body structures, body types, mobility limitations that kind of put them into categories that probably make more sense for them to do certain types of things. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, who knows, 5 years, it could kind of change again, but that's kind of where I feel like everyone should be at.
Cool. So since because it's not, our job is not only just let them to squat heavier, or not only just let them jump higher, or not only just chasing those numbers. So how to communicate with the coaching staff that but let them know what we're doing is valuable, or we are really helping our athletes. How to communicate with the coaching staff since our numbers not always going up.
Yeah, I think so. You're going to get to a point where you're going to hit that threshold, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to that point where there's, diminishing returns, where adding 10 pounds to the bar isn't going to help, isn't really going to matter all that much. So, I think it starts kind of from the top with, what the expectations are and what the end goal is. On the professional level, we want guys that can perform and win games. So, if we're collaborating and having some sort of integration with the skills staff to be able to, help somebody, clear up some mobility limitations so that they can get in better positions to swing or better positions to throw, that can, help them replicate their delivery or help them, adjust to a pitch and while they're swinging, then we're doing that. And that's what we want to be doing and what we should be doing. So, yeah, a lot of it comes back to the communication aspect. And I think more often than not, and this might just be kind of level specific for me, but I think more often than not, it's kind of relies more around mobility and movement limitations, and body structure and body type than anything else. So, there's certain guys that have hip mobility limitations that might not be able to accomplish a certain move in their swing, or might not be able to increase their stride length pitching just because, that's their body structure. That's what they were given and that's what they have to work around. So we have to collaborate to find an alternative approach to get it done.
Yeah. So, since it's the sport itself is so asymmetry, do you do let's say what we just mentioned, a hitter, there's gonna be a front leg and a back leg. The back leg we're going to be doing pushing, the front leg we're going to be doing some deceleration. Does that does this changes the way you program the strength training, and do you kind of do something reverse that, or no?
Yeah, you can. I think that's kind of a more of a philosophical principle type question, honestly. Yes, I would say yes. A right-handed hitter rotates to his left, right-handed thrower rotates to his left. So we want to be able to do that the other direction as well. I think a lot of that kind of comes back to that the discussion earlier with, how much asymmetry is good, how much asymmetry is too much. I think at the end of the day, we want to prevent somebody from an overuse injury, from say over rotating one way and kind of adjusting or adapting so that their entire body is shifting and how they kind of the workable range of motion that they have. But yes, I would have guys throw med balls the other direction, swing the other direction. I mean, I'm even for guys throwing left-handed if they're right-handed. I think it helps kind of like connect the mind and body together a little bit too, to help kind of firm up some movement patterns and things like that. But it's also kind of time specific or season specific, I should say, in season versus off season, preseason, postseason. It depends on the training cycle that you're in and, where you're at in terms of your game load and game volumes. While also kind of like managing workloads elsewhere, right? Or at least understanding what the workloads are elsewhere. So, from a hitting perspective, we have, guys that are going to, come in and do their lifts, and then they're going to go to the cage and they're going to take swings, and then they might take some more swings on the field, and then they might take swings right before the game. And, in the game, they're probably only getting, 4 or 5 swings, 10 swings, maybe. A lot of their swing volume comes from the cage and, BP and stuff like that. So, understanding how much of that is going on, we kind of have to, it's our job to kind of at least see that, identify that, and then make the necessary adjustments on our end. So we don't do, honestly, like I'm not a huge fan of doing a ton of rotating in season in the weight room, just because they do so much of it as it is. If anything, maybe rotating the opposite direction might be a little bit more beneficial to them, to help kind of restore some range of motion and kind of keep them a little bit more on that symmetrical path.
So how do you decide that, like, I know it, like, kind of like you have to like integrate with all the information or all the like what I just meant, the workload and the in season or off season, but usually when do you do those like different like direction of the rotational movement, and usually like how much, yeah, when and how much? I know it's hard. I know it's a like super hard question. I'm sorry. I hate to do this to you.
No, that's fine. I would say like opposite, like rotating the opposite way. I would do more in season, right? If as a right-handed hitter, always swinging, like rotating to his left. I don't think they need to do more of that rotating to the left, but they don't do any rotating to the right. So we could kind of program in a little bit rotating to the right. Again, I think that's kind of a philosophical thing. You want to do it as much as they're rotating to the left. You're going to be tossing med balls against the wall for a really long time. But at least enough to give them a little bit of a stimulus and help kind of keep their nervous system in the understanding that, hey, like you need to rotate this way too, or your body can still rotate this way. We don't have to just like shut that rotation component off and only focus on rotating that way. And then in the off season, really, I think a more of a balanced approach going into the off season, rotating both ways. Just having general athleticism, being able to throw, have the ability to create some force and throw the ball the opposite way. The med ball the opposite way you normally would rotate is super beneficial as well. Not just for, I guess, the rotational component of like your T-spine, but also your hips as well, and internal, external rotation of your pelvis, of your femur, rotating it at your T-spine and your cervical spine as well.
Cool. So, baseball is like the schedule is like very hectic, right? Crazy, then crazier than like basketball, right? So how to
Yes,
like
very busy.
manage? Yeah. So how to manage to like put in some training, like microdosing some training during the in season.
Yeah, so the professional season, competitive professional season starts really in February and goes. I mean, their major leagues are still in the playoffs right now, so goes into like November. So you're talking about playing pretty much every day for that entire span. There's a lot of travel, a lot of games, like long days, right? Days, it's not just when the lights come on and the cameras are on and the game flips on the TV, at 7 o'clock or whatever. It's it starts a lot earlier than that with you know all their preparation, all the additional practice, and you know other workloads that are going on. So it is a very hectic schedule. It's busy. It's long. Um, it's by no means like a contact sport like hockey or football, but it's mentally challenging just because you're playing somewhere for 3 days and then you're flying somewhere else for 4 days and you're coming home for three, and you're just kind of like bouncing all over the place, and it's a lot of late nights. I mean, I don't know if your average fan or person understands that, like, when you finish a game and and you're on the road, and I don't know, we'll say like from Tampa going back to Boston, like after the game's over, you're playing Sunday night baseball or something like that. You're playing 7 o'clock game, 3 hours, takes time to pack, get on the plane. Like by the time you actually get home, you're talking like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning after it's all said and done. So, and that happens like every 3 or 4 days, honestly. So, it is it's a different type of challenge, for sure.
So, as a strength coach or as a performance coach, it's like really hard. You probably like don't have that much of a time to spend with your family, your friends. So how do you deal with these kind of like issue, or yeah, how do you process these?
Yeah, it's kind of a newer, I'll say a newer type thing for me. So I have 3 kids. I'm married. I have 3 kids. Um, all of them under 4 years old. So it's kind of definitely a newer thing, but it kind of depends, honestly, on everyone's individual situation and kind of what works best for you and your family. For me, for us earlier on when our kids were younger, like infants, we would all travel together. So we would go to wherever I was. I was working in Salem, Virginia at the time. So we all would move down to Virginia, and I would, go to work like everybody else goes to work, just a little bit different of a schedule and, on the road and stuff. And when I would come home, I'd spend time with them in the mornings. And, now they're getting older and they're in school and stuff like that. So, we live in Massachusetts. This is our home base, and they stay here during the year, and I travel wherever I'm traveling. And on off days, I come home, and on the weekends, they'll come up and watch games. And so I think everyone's a little bit different. It depends. Like if it's just you and your spouse, like, and he or she has the flexibility to travel for work or work remotely, then you can kind of do it together. If not, then you're kind of living apart for a little while, and then you can get your off seasons to kind of catch up on stuff. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm we're like 3 weeks into the off season, so I've been kind of transitioning back to wearing more of my dad and husband hat again. Spending more time at home and making sure the kids are getting to school on time, and laundry's getting folded and all that stuff. So it's everybody's different. This is kind of what's worked for us, and thankfully now working in Maine, I'm only like a little under 3 hours drive from home. So if there's something I need to get home for, I can be home relatively quickly and see my family a lot more than in the past. So it's an ever evolving thing, really, just with how my career goes, how my wife's career goes, but also as our kids starts to get involved in sports and other after school activities and different advanced through schooling, and I think it's constantly evolving.
Cool, man. Cool. I really enjoy the way you like answer all my question. It kind of like let everyone know that let my audience know that the world of like strength and conditioning, or the world of like performance, isn't just like those stuff we learn in school, or isn't just the things we can like look in the book. In the real world, it's different animal. So I enjoy the way you answer it. Appreciate it, man. And I know you got like really crazy schedule and have to spend time with your family. So last thing before I let you go, okay?
Yeah.
If there's like anything, or like anyone like people are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, how can they reach out to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say best is probably email. Email or Instagram. I'm checking my Instagram pretty regularly. But I'll give you both. So my email is, I'll give you Joe, Joe, at hudsonstrength.com, HUDSON strength.com. And then I don't even know what my Instagram is. I think it's, let me pull it up. Let's see here. Hudson _ JR12.
Cool.
So yeah, people feel free to message me or, shoot me an email. I'm more of a traditionalist. I like the emails because I can, sit down, type them out, think about a good response, and open it when I have time to actually sit down and kind of give a thorough answer. I'm kind of one of those people that just keeps the email on unread until I know I'm gonna have some quality time to give a good response, and same with the messages on Instagram too. So whichever one works.
Cool, man. Cool.